Very good. Mhm.
Okay, we ready? Okay, today we have a work session to go over the fiscal year 2023 budget for the Petersburg Borough. It's not gonna be, no action will be taken at this work session. It's basically just a presentation from the finance director, Jody Tao, and department heads if there's any questions from assembly members of them. So at this point, I'll pretty much just let finance director Tao take over the meeting and start her presentation.
Okay, thank you. So this is going to be a fairly high overview of the budget, but go ahead and ask questions as we go through it. And if we get too hung up on something, maybe we can wait until the end if we have more time and do questions. And you can always ask more questions during the assembly meeting, and that's when you would make amendments or changes to the or propose changes to the budget. So borough budget highlights. So we added an additional building maintenance employee in the general fund and in the harbor department. Of course, we know that costs have increased dramatically for heating, fuel, insurance, utilities, CDLs, travel, supplies. Health insurance, liability, and property insurance, we budgeted a 10% increase. I just got off the phone like an hour ago with Susan Erickson, and the liability insurance increased about 10%. The property insurance has increased about 5%, maybe a little bit more than that. So I'm feeling good about the budget numbers that we did there. Payroll costs increased 2% for our PMEA union contract and 2.5% for the IBEW contract. The school is asking for $200,000 more for operations and an additional $200,000 for deferred maintenance capital outlay. We'll touch on that a little bit more later. We think there'll be an increase in state funding. The state hasn't finished their budget, so we don't know yet, right? But we did budget a little bit more for this jail contract and community assistance payments. And we are assuming that they're going to reimburse the 100% debt reimbursement for school bond debt, which they haven't been doing in the last 3 or 4 years. There's many open employment positions, as is everywhere in the borough.
If I could jump in real quick, that's important from a budgetary perspective because we budget for those positions for the full year, and we're seeing that that's not really happening just because we can't find people. So if anything, that should probably have a positive impact on the budget, but we can't anticipate that. That's the problem.
So the proposed general fund budget uses $265,000 of general fund reserves to balance the borough's budget. So looking at the chart, you can see we have sufficient reserves to do this. The jump in reserves has to do with a lot of the grants and leveraging how we were able to use them in the last few years. As you remember, we've used them to cover a lot of public safety costs. %65 of the general fund is supported by local taxes. 9% is charges for services. This would be things like overhead that the enterprise funds paid to the general fund, also ambulance fees, parks and rec fees. 14% state funding, that's like fisheries tax, community assistance, PERS relief, jail contract. 12% federal funding, that's federal grants are CCAD and PILT. And then the secure roll schools money passes through the general fund as well before it goes to the school. So we're estimating that sales tax will finish off our current fiscal year at about $3.3 million. We actually budgeted $3.2 million, but because of the growth in remote sales tax, it's really helped bump things up. So the borough began collecting online sales tax in April of 2020. That's the blue columns. We averaged about $10,000 a month in 2020 when we were just getting started. In 2021, the orange columns there, as you can see, the amount collected each month increased dramatically, and we averaged about $22,000 a month. The gray columns are for 2022, and what we have collected so far, they lag a few months before we get the money. But those have surpassed last year's. The revenue that we get, this is shown with all of the fees taken out that the Alaska Remote Sellers Commission charges us. Yes.
I have
Oh,
a-
go ahead.
I have a question just for clarification. This remote sales tax, this is people in town shopping online on retailers that sell that? Okay.
Correct. Anything that's delivered into the Petersburg Borough should be charged sales tax.
Okay,
And
and-
there's still some retailers catching on, like in the last year, they added some big ones like Target and a couple other big ones that really jumped things up.
Thank you, because it technically applies to if you're a local business doing a lot of like exporting, it applies to them too, right? Or,
Yeah, so a local business, if they're selling goods somewhere else in Alaska, they should actually be working with Alaska Remote Sellers Commission and charging the sales tax to whatever the sales tax is to where it's being delivered. And so it makes things a little bit more complicated for our local businesses,
Mhm.
but the commission's there to help them through that process,
Mhm.
and their website is pretty user-friendly and spells everything out, so they don't have to call and ask, what's the tax rate, what are the exemptions, things like that.
thank you.
So really, if everything were to stay the same in our sales taxes, and we would assume that we would have at least $200,000 more in sales tax a year, but we didn't last year. We stayed flat, which means that our local sales were down, to offset that. So it's a great thing that we decided to, start doing this when we did. So this budget is put together using the same mill rate as last year and the year before. The property tax for service area 1 is budgeted to be the same at 11.5 mils. 4.2 mils of property tax will go to the school next year. This is equivalent to 1.4 million. The other $600,000 to the school is going to come from Secure Rural Schools funding. And that fund has a balance of about $4 million. General operations for the general fund is the mill rate charged to service area 1. So this is the additional that service area 1 pays, and then also the 1.8 million or 1.8 mils for debt service. And this debt service is only applied to the old city, so service area 1. If we were to vote on another bond, and the whole borough voted for another general obligation bond, that would apply borough-wide to everyone because everyone would be voting on it in the borough.
Jody, back to the other one. What difference in property tax increase from previous year? 2%, 3%? What was, do you have any?
You mean the
idea?
assessed value?
Yeah. Did our assessed value go up?
Our assessed value went up $5 million. So the general fund expenses begin on page 26 of your budget. This chart shows how our taxes and state and federal funds are being spent. As you can see, the top 3 expenditures are public safety, which is the police and the fire department, the school, and general government. And then streets is right behind that. So I just wanted to compare what we currently have budgeted to next year's proposed budget and the change. And this is total expenses. And I'll just hit some of the ones that are a little bit bigger for the finance department. $20,000 of it is payroll, health insurance, things like that. And $8,000 was an increase to the property tax assessor. He needs to go out and look at all the places off Mitkoff Island and the expenses to charter a boat or a plane are quite expensive. The police department, the $191,000 increase, $159,000 of that is due to payroll, $13,000 is due to motor pool replacement, and $8,000 is due to travel and training. Fire EMS is up $45,000, $12,000 is due to payroll, $11,000 is due to building maintenance and supplies, $6,000 increase is in travel and training, and $12,000 due to machine and equipment purchase. Public Works is up $181,000. This is due to $136,000 is an increase to payroll. And that's because of the additional building maintenance person that they're proposing to put in the budget this year. An increase of $12,000 to travel and training, and $16,000 increase to motor pool O&M charges. Community services is up $200,000. This is that, the school. And we talked about that. Yes,
And the police department, part of that $191,000 increase, proposed increase, does that have anything to do with the decision the assembly made recently to pay the dispatchers more?
yes.
So how much of that, do you have any idea?
I don't have the breakdown of that. I'm
That's fine.
sorry.
I'm just curious if that
Yeah.
had an
Yeah.
effect. But I figured it would.
Parks and Rec is up $50,000. The majority of this increase is for utilities. This could change once the pool's been fixed. Transfers out, this is just up $200,000, but really it has to do with our business fisheries tax. We budgeted to receive a lot more of fish tax this year than we did last year. And so because we bring it into the general fund, and then we transfer out a certain amount to the harbor. And so we're just budgeting that we're going to end up transferring more out to the harbor. So really, it's a good thing. It's not an
Going
additional
back to
expense.
community services, what's the big increase there? The $200,000 increase?
I mean, that's the school.
School.
Ready?
Yes.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, so the community service component, that is strictly the schools. What else is included in community service?
Actually, I'm glad you has a good intro because it's on this next slide. The Clausen Museum, KFSK, and Mountain View Food Services are also included in community services. We actually put in the budget what they requested. So this is what they requested for funding. The chambers paid from transit room tax funds. So I just put it on this slide because it's similar organization.
About the building maintenance person that we're thinking of hiring or trying to hire. So currently we have one person on staff for that. And this person will help that person that we have on staff.
I'll speak to this. Currently, we have a building maintenance person that is specific to the manor, which is a full-time job, and one in Parks and Rec, which is a full-time job. We have a third maintenance person, which handles all the rest of the buildings. So unfortunately, he has not been able to keep up as the buildings age, and he just literally cannot keep up with everything that's needed. So it was my decision to try to get and fund a second building maintenance person that gives us some backup, as well as maybe getting to all the projects that aren't happening. And another big issue is, actually, I'm willing to spend money locally. We can't find local handymen. We tried to do that first, and we just can't get in on anybody's schedule. They're so busy doing everything else that they're not available to work for the borough either. So we're gonna have to grow our own is what it comes down to.
You mentioned the increase in police salaries. What does that mean? I mean, is that an overtime thing, or what was that number? When we looked up there before, there was you mentioned several different things.
So there is an increase in police wages, which the assembly did approve an increase to wages. Plus there is the union 2% increase.
And the benefit costs have gone up.
So currently, one of the police officers is funded by CCAD, correct? And is that just a one-year program, or does that, I know it rotates around Southeast, but when that funding goes to a different community, do we pick up the rest of the?
It actually doesn't rotate around Southeast. Who's in charge might rotate around. But the
Okay.
person actually has been here in Petersburg for the whole time, 11 years or longer.
Okay,
And we continue to receive that funding that pays for 100% of that employee salary and benefits. Up to some reason, if we use them locally for some reason, we have to pay for that. Meaning if they do non-CCAD work here in town.
and is that funding coming out of the overtime budget for the police department? If he works for the local police department when he's not doing CCAD work, or where does that?
I don't know that it happens very often, but if it'd come out of our general payroll budget, if, for example, if there was nothing going on in CCAD and we had him working a patrol or doing an investigation locally that is not CCAD related, that would come out of our general police funding.
And I do the financial reports for that, and it only happens if they're really short-staffed and they need someone.
Are we considered short-staffed now? Okay. Thank you.
And I should mention that the school is actually zooming in case you have any questions for them. Their costs have gone up. They've been receiving $1.8 million for like the last 20 years. And their funding from the state has also decreased in the last 5 years just due to lower and lower enrollment numbers. And there might be some other factors too, but they're the experts and they're on the Zoom in case you have any questions.
I know one of their things is similar to what Parks and Rec, which is utilities have gone up. And that hits them in heating fuel as well.
I have a question about the schools. I know there was discussion that at some point in the future, they need a new roof. And I assume that would be a separate bond issue that we would do at that point.
Correct.
And then does this budget also reflect the amount of money that we have to pay does this budget also, does this also reflect the costs that they incurred for repairing the roof from the snow damage last winter? Have they gotten that out of their own budget, or are we kicking in on that?
That is in their own budget.
Yeah, but I believe it's their own insurance at this point.
Mhm, they're still working with their insurance is the last that we heard.
Right, okay, thanks.
I'm going to jump into the enterprise funds unless anyone has any general fund questions.
I have one question, and maybe if the superintendent can answer this. I was talking to a legislator in Juneau, and unexpectedly, it sounds like this year the state could, if it passes, through the budget process, supply $200 million to be divvied up through different schools for maintenance projects. We have to apply. And to my knowledge, but I was told that Petersburg didn't apply, and maybe that was because they didn't expect that there would be that funding possible. So is that potentially the extra $200,000 for the school instead of 1.8? As I understand that they've been getting the same amount for decades, like you said. So I don't know if Erica can answer that or not. Just kind of curious if they did apply for that.
Sure. I'm happy to talk about capital projects and how we've been on lists over the years. Since 2017, we've had 6 huge projects that have gone through with the siding at the elementary, that remodel, and then the huge cafeteria project. What we really ran into, honestly, is after participating shares have gone out and all of those things, we kind of maxed out on that. So our capital budget was substantially hit to be able to provide those participating shares over the years for those projects. And really just honestly, staffing resource became maxed out on those huge projects. And then the moratorium hit and all those things. So we are in the process of working with CERC, the Southeast Regional Resource Center. We all lost our grant writer there, Don Hiley, who we've worked with for years, who has helped us secure those various projects. They typically cost about $7,000 to $10,000 just to do the grant application. So that's another piece of it. And then there's, just the costs that go along with providing those participating shares. What we have had also good luck with is securing reimbursement on the other side. And that has been helpful to us. So that is where we are focusing right now on the roof repair. Once we work through the insurance issues, we have met with CERC and we are meeting with them. They're looking to hire a new grant writer there. Unfortunately, he passed away last year, in addition to being completely overloaded with grants around the state. So that's kind of where we are right now. So you are correct. We are not on that list right now, but we are moving forward with our insurance repairs and with the process of applying now for the future to be on that list, and we'll apply for reimbursement or to be funded. So that's kind of where we are.
Okay, thank you very much.
You bet.
Other questions before I move on? Right, so enterprise funds, they start on page 38 of the budget. As you can see from the pie chart, charges for services are how the enterprise funds how they function and collect revenues to cover their expenses. There are some utility rate increases on July 1st. The electric is about 9.5% on average. Water 3%, wastewater 3%, and sanitation 3%. The water and wastewater is still going through assembly approval right now. And then the harbor rates increased in April. So I did the same thing with enterprise funds as I did with the general fund, just to give you a comparison of how much the budgets have increased or decreased. The electric's decreased because last year, Director Hagerman had a lot of transfers out from the electric fund to capital projects to fund them. And so that's why it looks like there is a big decrease, but it remained fairly flat. The harbor department did jump up a little bit. They have added another person for next year. And then assisted living, that increase is just in the staffing, but that Steve and I were talking about it, and that's probably going to change now that they're, go ahead, I'll cover it.
Okay. So I've been working with Sheila because one of our issues are we can't find people. So as units have become available, we have gone with the least impact we can. So we're starting to convert the upstairs units back to independent living, which means we don't have to have RAs up there to participate in the staffing. So again, this does not affect current residents, but it is reducing our number of assisted living residents for the future. And again, it's a staffing issue. We can't find people and we can't take responsibility for some of these folks if we don't have the right people and trained people in place. So that will impact staffing over time as enough units are either on really low care plans like 1s or 2s or independent living. We'll end up using less RAs or needing less RAs and less overtime. It's really hard to anticipate or to have a number because we don't know what the residents will be doing. Do we have residents that stay? Do we have residents that leave? And then when we go to replace them, what does that look like? But new residents coming in, tier 1 and or care plan 1s and 2s, or independent living if it's set up for that. And it's mostly a staffing issue.
Can you describe what independent living is?
Yeah, when that facility was originally built, and Sheila, correct me if I say anything wrong, the entire second floor of the assisted living building was set up for people just to rent an apartment, older folks.
Yep, the top floor, all 8 apartments were all independent living. And then we got licensed in, I think it was 2012, to have up to 30 assisted living residents. So then the whole place became assisted living preference. And so, yeah, now what we're seeing is not enough staff and some heavy hitters here and there. So we're just going to start replacing the upstairs ones with people who are renting an apartment basically, and we're not providing any care plans or any services for them. They're just renting an apartment, they're paying for their direct TV and they're paying to do their own laundry. So
So does independent living, are there any requirements to rent up there, or are they just in the rental market like everybody else who might be renting an apartment?
they're just renting an apartment. They just have to have the money to pay the rent and they can come in.
Thank you.
And I assume you have to be over 65.
Yes.
And then and you probably can't answer this because you don't know. So let's say I moved into an independent apartment upstairs. Then I needed assisted living. Would I be able to move downstairs if that happened, or?
So that was the great thing about having the whole place be assisted living. You didn't have to move downstairs. So as it is now, if you did require assisted living and you lived upstairs, you would have to put in an application for assisted living, number one. And then number two, when it came your turn, you would have in-house preference because you're already in the house. So you would trump the other 35 people that are on the list who might not be in-house, if that makes sense. It's just like the elderly housing building is also in-house preference for assisted living.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shailene.
So I'm going to turn it over to Carl to talk about some capital projects. Someone wants to pass the mic down to him so we can. So currently the ones that are in the budget for next year for the electric department.
Yeah, thanks, Jody. So we do have a number of projects in the power and light department. Auto control system is basically our SCADA system, upgrading that, keeping up on it. 24/9 electric rebuild, we're almost to the end of that. The only portion of the system that we have remaining that's on the 2400 system is up at the airport. And we've got some plans to switch that up this year. And so we'll have a 24/9 throughout our system. Should be great. Still have a project to install a shed roof out at the pool yard Scow Bay to protect our materials that we get in and store out there. Standby diesel generator project, of course, that's the larger one to add diesel out at Scow Bay. EPS is our consultant on the design study report, and they're making their way through it. It should have been done quite a while ago, but they're a fairly small shop and they're pretty busy. So the last update that I got from them was a draft that showed that we truly do need to add about 3.5 megawatts as soon as possible. So we have to run diesel for any length of time, and one of our generators goes down, which is kind of how you base your outlook on providing standby diesel. We could be in a hole in the wintertime if that happens, during the highest peaks of the year. So
You had that, will that reduce the unit cost? In other words, will those be more efficient?
they surely will, yeah. Any new generation that we put on is more efficient than the older units that we have. The hydro station, substation upgrade, we've got a switch out there that we've been wanting to replace for quite some time. Just trying to find the timing to do it has been difficult. But now that we actually have the Blind Slough Hydro project going forward, we're going to incorporate that work into the larger project, and that way for sure it will get done. And speaking of the Blind Slough project, that is moving forward. A lot happening on that. The equipment supplier is in the process of manufacturing equipment right now. Lots of meetings and communication back and forth between that. Jilks, the supplier, and our engineers, as well as our engineers have put out a packet of information to stakeholders such as the Fish and Wildlife Service, Fish and Game, the hatchery, in regard to the license amendment that we're going to have to push through FERC in relation to that project. And so far getting very little feedback from the stakeholders, which is good news. Hopefully that will help us navigate the FERC process pretty effectively. Downtown street lighting is a project to replace all of the street lights with a little more decorative. Right now, those street light and poles are pretty plain Jane, and this project is going to replace them with something that's a lot more aesthetically pleasing, although it's really not a priority, so it's kind of farther down on the list. And the GIS mapping is a new project, although it's been something that we've been trying to get off the ground for a while. And that project is to, what it means to utilities, excuse me, is to update the information in our mapping system so that the people in the field have accurate information when they go out to provide service. But it also is a stepping stone to a really nice system that has many applications in property taxes and again, utilities. And actually it expands into planning and evaluation of the current utility systems. And it's just a lot of data comes into that system. Also from the utility billing system, from the AMI system, the remote read electric meters. And eventually someday it will be a really nice system and a great asset for Petersburg. So we're just getting going on that with trying to get our utility maps as accurate as possible. That will involve a field survey where we'll have a contractor come to town and basically verify the location of all of the infrastructure that we have out there. So that's water, sewer, and electric.
We approved the purchase of meters and I think purchase of poles here a while back. Are those included in this budget or were they also in last year's budget?
So we recently, we've requested purchasing the assembly for some large commercial meters. And those will hopefully be delivered in this next fiscal year. And that number is included in the budget. And we also ask for purchase of some transformers, which again will hopefully be delivered in this budget, next budget year. The money is there for that. It's very the conference that I went to a couple weeks ago. It was a major topic of discussion, the supply chain issues, and it's really amazing how things have kind of fallen apart, and the long lead times are just going to be a fact of life for here on out. We're encouraging any customers that might have a project here in the next year, or have new construction, need a new structure served by power, they better come talk to us right away because we only have a limited number of transformers, and those are being spoken for as time goes on. Did that answer your question?
Carl, I have one question. The third item, the storage yard relocation out to Scow Bay. Is that moving out of the piece of property that is on the road? I don't know if it's 8th Street that goes up to the sewer treatment plant. Is that?
It's related to that. I suppose it's, we have the new pole yard out at Scow Bay, and we do want to build some covers so we can put wire reels underneath, get them out of the rain, and the transformers too. And it'll just make those things last a lot longer. We don't have very many things stored at the old pole yard on 14th Street by the wastewater plant, but there are some things. I think this project would allow us to move everything out of that 14th Street. Like I said, there really isn't much there anymore. It's getting cleaned out pretty good.
Okay, thanks.
Carl, under travel and training budget, there's an item for Rocky Mountain metering training. What does that entail, or what is that?
Our meter reader also should be trained to do some basic metering as well. And metering it's a separate discipline of the power industry. And so there's a lot of information, a lot of training that goes into somebody fully understanding how a meter works, how to work on them, all the issues involved with that. So it's a short school that will provide that training to our meter reader so that she's better equipped to deal with things in the field.
Thank you. And also on there is the Altech Customer Boot Camp for, I guess is that motor pool mechanic?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
So our service trucks are starting to get, up there in age, and we have relied on Altech mechanics to come to town to do maintenance on those. But the Power and Light is budgeting to send one of the motor pool mechanics to an Altech training, so they have a little bit better understanding of the trucks and are able to perform the preventative maintenance here in town.
Thank you.
Onto that mic, Carl.
Yes, capital projects for water department. So Fram Street, water main replacement. This is, there's a section of old asbestos cement pipe that basically is routed through the muskeg, the top of Fram Street from the end of Ninth, at Ninth to 10th Street, which is up there at the top of the hill. Used to be a water storage tank location way back when, and that's why the pipe is there. It came directly into town from there. But that we've had a couple failures on that transite main over the years and really need to replace that section through the muskeg. Singley Alley main replacement. We've got a water main that's actually in the beach down there underneath the bridge. And really like to get that out of the salt water and up under the bridge so that it's not only safer, but it'll last longer for those folks. Lake Street transite water main. Lake Street does have also an asbestos cement water line that is fairly shallow and it's in the ditch line up there. And so this project would be to replace that. And we would do that in conjunction with, on the wastewater list, there's a Lake Street sewer main issue. So one project, one contractor would go in and replace the water main and the sewer up there. So we don't have to dig up that net neighborhood twice. On the wastewater side, the pump station 4 force main replacement is a project to replace the ductile iron force main that goes around Hungry Point. It sprung a leak a few years ago and we were able to repair it, but it really needs to be, it's really deep. So it's hit by tide water twice a day for decades now. So that definitely contributes to corrosion, and we'd like to get that actually put through up away from the beach. There's some platted right of ways that go back through the woods, basically behind the houses along Hungry Point, and go into over to where the path comes down, Hungry Point path comes down. Still in it, we're not very far on that design, but that's kind of the idea. Get it away from the beach. And then pump station 3, we're in the process of slowly upgrading our major pump stations, and that would be the next one. Pump station 4, along with the force main, we'll update those pumps at that time, and then we'll be focusing on pump station 3, updating those pumps.
Questions for Carl on any of those?
Those are most of those contract, will you put those out for contract, Carl, or what do you? And will they all be done essentially be on the streets this year, or are there just parts of it?
It's a lot of work. You know, all of those last 2 slides, all basically would be managed by me. I'm not gonna have enough time to do all of them, but hopefully we'll get going on several of these, at least get the funding squared away with DC and the design work done, and then see how the workload goes.
Oh, the water line that goes around Hungry Point that's affected by the salt water, was that ductile iron?
It is.
So is there any new technology, new type of pipe, or is that the best we could get?
Well, we're changing our standards to go to HDPE, which is plastic, essentially, really heavy duty stuff. So we'll use that in combination with getting it off the beach, and it should last, gosh,
Or like
really long time.
Okay, thanks.
Sanitation. Chris, I was wondering if you could talk about the increase due to CDLs. It affects not just the sanitation department, but other departments as well. And then maybe go through the slide.
Okay, so I guess I'll go through it item by item here. The 3% increase was something that we came to during the rate study. We looked at different options for recycling. That was really the big variable in what our rate increase ended up being. And by going to an every other week recycling program and being able to drop one truck out of our active fleet, we were able to keep rate increases to 3% annually. And as it says on the slide, our last rate increase was in 2018, and of course, the costs have continued to go up. So it's our 3% is much needed for operations. Expense side, travel and training budget has gone up quite a bit. When we were putting the budget together, we had budgeted $15,000 for one operator to get CDL training. That's way higher than historic cost for that. We used to be able to do that back in 2008 when I was hired with the city. It was a couple $100 to get your CDL. Costs have gradually increased because the state has pulled back the services they offer. So we've been having to bring in an outside contractor to provide some of the service, the testing service. And then the big thing is there were some federal regulations that just came into play recently that now require for someone getting a CDL, it requires them to spend 40 hours in a truck with a certified CDL examiner and trainer. So for that, we have to send some, our employees out to a facility that offers that training. When I put in that $15,000 cost, we were originally thinking that we would have to send our personnel up to Anchorage. There's a driving school up there. That $15,000 was based on the cost they gave us. Since that time, Justin Haley in the wastewater department was doing a little research on it, found out that there is a service provider in Juneau that brings the cost down quite a bit. So I think instead of 15, I think we can probably put in 10,000 and have a safe number there. It's still, like I say, way higher than years past, but because of the federal regulations that have come into play, I don't think there's any way around that cost. And anybody got any questions about that?
I was just going to say, over time, that we may see some improvements in Juneau. When we were up in Anchorage at the Grant Symposium, I was speaking to the University of Alaska in Juneau, one of their reps. He said, this is such a huge issue. They're creating a new, not to say degree track, I'm not, that's not the right word, but basically they're putting a training program in for people. They can go to the university and get their CDL. So we may see that improve some of this down the road, but short term, Chris is right. We're into this for having to send employees off-site to get their CDL for, a week.
Under machinery and equipment, there's a $36,000 for garbage carts, and a lot of those are the 300-gallon carts. We are almost at the end of our transition from metal dumpsters to 300-gallon carts. That process has required us to purchase more 300s, and we're also going to see more attrition in the 300-gallon carts as we get a lot more of them out there in service. So that's the 36,000, and then there's 17,000 in machinery and equipment for replacement of our 500,000 BTU waste oil burner. We have 2 of those burners up at the Baylor facility. They do periodically wear out. The heat exchangers get rusty and start getting holes in them, and so our 500,000 is it's basically time to replace that. We've been patching it together for a couple years now. Fire sprinkler replacement, that is basically a capital project that isn't really big enough to put in its own capital project fund. So we are carrying that over from last year. We're putting together some information on that system. We may not have to replace the entire thing. We were thinking last year that we might have to replace all the piping and everything, but it's looking like we might be able to scale back that project, maybe fit it within the $75,000 budget. So hopefully that will get taken care of in FY '23.
Are there any questions for Chris?
This is in the packet, on page 45, under it's hazmat event.
Yeah.
Could you speak to that?
Yes, the Borough Sanitation Department has traditionally done an HHW event, that stands for Household Hazardous Waste. And we have not done it for a couple years now, mostly due to COVID, and there are other factors. Our HHW provider has essentially doubled their costs from what their contract allows. So we're gonna have to select a new provider. And I bumped up that cost a little from what we have historically budgeted, just due to the fact that HHW collectors are charging more these days. And there's been a little bit of a delay. We haven't had an event for a while, so we're expecting probably a little more material. We do anticipate holding that event probably this fall, early in the fall, September or so. Yep.
Harbor. So the harbor's budget's found on page 47 of your budget. Will, do you want to talk about the slide a little bit?
Sure. Well, we successfully went through the rate increase. So people are gonna be coming in, having to pay $50 for lunch permit. I'm waiting for what to hit. So we are proposing to add a new employee. When I was hired as a harbor master, I didn't replace myself, and we've really been kind of cobbling it together. I had to bring the night guy in to cover for me so I could be here today because we are so short-staffed. We do a lot of single-handed, single people on for a lot of the week. So if we're gonna have 24/7 service, we gotta have another person. Facility maintenance, 60,000. That is, if we don't get the Petro building, or if we get the Petro building, we're gonna have to put some money into it. If we don't get the Petro building, I gotta do something to expand a maintenance facility, whether it's put it into design or something. So that's there. Corps of Engineers, we've got down for 500. We'd like to bump that up actually in the first reading to 1.1 because we went to bid, and that number came in with our contribution being at 2.1 rather than what we were expecting to be over 4 million. So that was good news, but we hadn't gotten that bid information yet when we built this. So we're gonna ask at the first reading to bump that up to the 1.1 million. That'll be our portion of it. Petro, if we get to buy that, I figure the trade is about 85,000. Middle Harbor anode installation, that's just been a carryover. A lot of these things are always on our radar, but we put it in the budget so that you know about it, but we a lot of times don't pull the trigger. We've been waiting for that dredge to get announced so that we knew if we had enough money, but we do have to put zincs in the Little Harbor. Bobcat telehandler we need in the harbor. This year we ended up being down our flatbed and a snow plow. And so we were kind of the afterthought from everywhere from Public Works to the contractors in town. And so we would use that in the wintertime for moving snow, that kind of stuff. But we also need it as for picking up large things. Right now, we bought years ago the forklift that the city has, and we house it up at Public Works, but we got to take a number to get it, to run it all the way down to the harbor to use it. So this piece of equipment would really help the operation. So got a little bit of money. We're hoping we can afford it. We're hoping we can find one for that price. And if we can't, we won't. So like, again, we're an enterprise fund, so we don't spend it if we can't find the deal that we propose or we don't have the money. And the galvanized steel piling, I need to have those on hand. The 84 piles in the South Harbor are showing their wear, even though we did zinc them about 10 years or 20 years ago now. We're having a few that are rotting off at the mud line. And so I had to have one removed this winter. And what I'm proposing is when this dredge happens, I can see that some of those might get jiggled a little bit more than we want, and they might get compromised and we have to replace them. And instead of pulling out, I've talked to different contractors, we're talking about sleeving them with a 16-inch. All what we have down there now are 12-inch piles. And so if I have half a dozen, whatever we can afford for this number, a dozen of them kicking around, then we can come through, send a diver down, pull the zincs off, put the 16-inch over the top and drive it over the 12-inch pile to just secure things. So the dredge, in the dredge contract, they're not supposed to go, or they can go up to 5 feet away from the piling. But as we know, this is blue clay. And a lot of times when you start messing with the mud down there, it gets like jello. And so I can see that that'll probably could be an issue. So we just want to be, it's so hard to get materials, as you know. We want to have some on the beach ready to go in case this happens. So
How many, how many piling then are you talking about buying with 110?
a dozen, maybe,
How many?
maybe 10 to a dozen, something like that.
What you're describing, are you really looking at, I guess, in the next few years down the road, a much bigger project to replace many of those?
Well, we zinced everything. And so, and every 10 years I have a diver go down and we actually have a gauge, we can measure them. So I'm pretty confident that we're enough ahead of it that 10 will do it. And once you get those done, we re-zinc it, it should be good for another 40, 50 years. So, but yeah, there's a lot of pilings down there that at some point we'll have to, that's the difference between wood and steel. So,
Back to two other questions for you back then. So you can take the $85,000 and 60,000 goes essentially to the same place, to the petrol facility when you got it?
yes, yep, yeah, it would probably go to the same place if we were to get Petro. If we don't get Petro, or if it doesn't happen this year or whatever, then I gotta start looking at something to get some a maintenance facility. Maybe we'd have to design, something in the middle harbor, fill in there and put in a building over there or something, so.
Last question is back to your piling. Where is the, I assume then you have in the budget to hire, to put those in place? Those,
Yep, that would come in, we'd have to come back to you to say, we have South Harbor maintenance in our budget. And we have also the contingency, and we'd use that money in there.
Any other questions?
You have $25,000 listed for office repairs? What is that? What's your vision on that?
Well, this last couple months, we have had quite a plumbing issue. And we're looking at the possibility, if we don't look at fixing what's going on under there, of shutting the bathrooms and the public restrooms down. That building was built in 1980. We had a roof issue from the snow. We've got a lot of issues underneath the building. And so we're just expending more and more money on upkeep there. So I went to actually Steve last week and I said, I think maybe we even have to start looking at a little bit bigger of a project. So we might be coming to you with a bigger project for that.
We've looked at plumbing and electric, and they're both suspect at this point. So we've had some local contractors take a look at it. So I asked Lo, we need to start thinking about, the conceptual drawing kind of thing. Where would we put a new harbor office, you know, what does it need to have? We need to start having those conversations now before hers falls into the North Harbor. Anyway, but we've got, there's some maintenance issues that have to be dealt with, and we'll figure out as we go through whether they're fixable or whether we have to come back to the assembly at some point and say it's a bigger project and we've got to start at least talking about the architectural side of that. We don't have an answer yet.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mountain View Manor, capital outlays, elderly housing budget of 21,000 for a bathroom remodel. What that is actually a change out of a lot of the aging fixtures that they can't find replacement parts for anymore. $10,000 for window replacement, which she does every year, correct, Shulin? Does a few every year. And then just basic, you know, wear and tear, maintenance, power washing, things like that. Any questions about that? Or about their budget?
What does the $55,000 cover for overtime pay under assisted living fund?
Well, Sheilyn can jump in a minute, but I'll goes right back to our whole conversation about staffing. We're required to have a certain number of people there based on the number of residents to keep people safe. And this has been one heck of the last couple of years as far as staffing goes. I mean, we have not, I'd have to have Becky in here, but I asked her off the cuff, has there been a period of time since she started with us that we have not had open positions? And the answer was no. And I guess it goes back, probably goes back farther than that.
Right now, it's when people call in sick at the last minute, whatever, if they've got COVID or whatever, then you have to pull other people that have already worked 5 days that week. They're coming in for 2 hours of double time because they've only had, you know, maybe a couple hours in between their shifts. And it's just, that's what that is. And it's a nightmare, honestly.
Thank you.
Vince? Your pool. So 4 new vehicles are being recommended for purchase, and then 2 are carryover from this year that we just haven't purchased yet. Chris, do you want to go over those a little bit? You mind?
No, that's fine. So maintenance truck for building maintenance, that's a van, Ford 1-ton cutaway van. It's had a lot of issues over the years, and we do want to get it replaced. We were having trouble finding a complete vehicle last year. We could find chassis. We were not able to find a body to make a vehicle out of. So that one has slipped into another budget year. We're hopeful that we'll be able to find everything we need to put together a truck for FY23. Police department patrol unit, that was approved for purchase. We just don't think we're going to get that, you know, until FY23. It was approved in FY22. Water department tracked all-terrain vehicle. This is, and Carl can jump in here if I'm misstate on anything, but that is a vehicle primarily used by the water department in the winter time to access Cabin Creek Dam. The roads are all snowed in there, and so it's really the only way they have to get out there in the winter and keep an eye on things. They also periodically use it in the summer if they have to go out in the muskeg, because it's a tracks, it's very light ground pressure and it doesn't disturb the muskeg. We looked at different options for replacement of that. And, you know, we looked at it, you know, possibly snow machines. Those really don't have the right capabilities. And so the existing unit is getting really tired. They don't make a lot of parts for it. Transmission is one thing that is having issues. If it goes out, they don't make any parts for that. You're looking for something on eBay. So anyway, we're budgeting to replace that vehicle FY23 with essentially just the same thing, carbon copy of what they have now, as close as possible. Public Works Vector truck. That is a frontline response vehicle we use for cleaning sewer lines, catch basins, outhouses. And we use it a lot for vacuum excavation. If you're digging around sensitive infrastructure, using air pressure to excavate is a whole lot better than digging with a shovel. And so that truck is an extremely useful truck, an extremely critical truck for us. And we're seeing signs that it's, it's at the terminal stage of its career right now. We've been looking at that truck for replacement for a while. We first evaluated it back in 2014. We've extended it multiple times, and due to just a kind of a combination of issues that it has now, it's got a lot of wiring issues. It has a lot of fluid, hydraulic leaks. The body has got a lot of rust on it, and none of that stuff's going to be easy to address, and could result in the truck having a failure that results in a lot of downtime. So because of that, and also potentially long lead time to replace it, we are budgeting to replace that truck in FY23. Another unit is the Parks and Rec compact backhoe loader. That's a tractor that they use for lots of different purposes. Stephanie can jump in here if I miss anything, but they use it as a forklift. They use it for hauling grounds keeping supplies. They occasionally use it for grave digging and other functions at the cemetery. So right now, the unit that they have is an older Bobcat, and it is currently out of service. It's got some pretty major issues, some severe rust issues. The latest thing that's occurred is the main hydraulic pump has gone out. And it's going to be a significant expense to either get that rebuilt or replaced. Another thing we run into with that unit is that it's no longer supported with parts. So a lot of things, if they break, we can't find replacements. And they don't make that tractor anymore. And so, yeah, it's one of those things. It's pretty much obsolete in addition to being completely worn out. So we are budgeting to replace that FY23. The Harbor flatbed pickup, that one is also on the board. That is, I believe, was approved in a supplemental budget for FY22. With the lead time for vehicles these days, we do not anticipate being able to purchase that before FY23. And as you see there, the Harbor Department is directly funding the largest portion of that purchase. We had approximately $10,000 in the motor pool replacement fund for that vehicle that we will contribute to the purchase. And that's the summary there. Anybody got any questions?
Well, it's just more of a statement. If you haven't caught the trend, going back to Carl's having to order meters and transformers ahead of time, vehicles have become another part of that story. So many things we're having to roll over. It's not because we don't have the money or haven't budgeted for it. It's literally can't find them, especially when you get into some of the specialty stuff. So it's really hit and miss, and we're starting to worry things like the Vector truck. Chris has, mentioned it. What the lead time on that is, it's like a fire truck. I mean, we don't know. This may end up getting 2 years from now before we can actually get it here in town. So, but sometimes we find it, and until we budget for it and get approval, we can't snap up a deal if we have managed to come across this. We're having this problem with police cars, even just regular work trucks are a problem for us. So I think it's going to be kind of how we have to operate going forward, at least for a while.
Any other questions?
Chris, out of curiosity, on the Harbor flatbed with the snowplow, that wasn't on the replacement schedule. In other words, we haven't been paying into the motor pool fund on that. I guess my question is why Is that a new vehicle? What?
Yeah, so it was in the replacement schedule. However, when the harbor originally purchased that truck, or when Motor Pool acquired it for the harbor, it was purchased as a used vehicle. Carl got a really good deal on it, and so the replacement contributions were based on the acquisition cost. The thought was, that we would source another used vehicle, I guess, when that vehicle reached the end of its life. Because the harbor uses that thing so much, the truck that we bought several years ago is completely worn out at this point. It's had numerous breakdowns. And we decided, with the cost of used vehicles being so high these days, that it was probably better, given the usage that they have, that high usage that they put that thing through. Plus the cost to get something used, we figured it was better to source a new vehicle for them and know that they've got something that'll last, 15 years or more before they have any trouble with it.
Have one more main slide. I know we're on a time crunch. We want a little break before the meeting. So this is on page 66, one of the ARPA grants. We were awarded $633,000. The assembly obligated up to $20,000 for the Mountain View Manor deck project. I think that project actually has been done, but I don't think that we've been invoiced for it yet. So I don't know what the total of that ended up being. We put in the proposed budget to spend $30,000 for audit fees. So our audit fees have really gone up since we've started getting all of these federal grants, like a lot. And so I'm hoping to use some of this money to offset that, and instead of putting it in the general fund. $50,000 for Parks and Rec energy efficiency. What that is a new pool cover, because the other one is disintegrating, I believe. Is that, yeah, right. And then also is like $5,000 for mats for the cemetery. Stephanie, do you want to explain what that is exactly?
Sure, I can help. These are called Moby mats, and you can roll them out so that people can walk better in the cemetery for any kind of service or anything like that. They were laying down pieces of plywood covered with AstroTurf. And this will help to be able to roll it out so that people have a walkway to get in between different burial sites.
And then $65,000 was put in there for daycare, because that had been talked about previously. $200,000 is for school deferred maintenance. So that was part of that we had talked about with the school earlier. And then $50,000 for cybersecurity and hardware costs. This leaves actually $218,000 of this grant that, we have until 2024 to spend it. So it's not like we have to budget for it all right now. And these are, again, this is just a proposal. I put some things in, and if the assembly wants to amend this, they can at any opportunity. Any questions about that? So today is the first reading of the budget, and then we have 2 more readings to go. It needs to be approved by June 15th. And that is all I have, unless there's questions.
Thank you for your presentation and all the questions. And I guess our work session is over. We'll discuss the budget more in an hour or so.
Thank you.